order. This is the special call board meeting for June 6, 2019. Do we need a roll call?
You do.
All right, Dr. Means, will you help us with that roll call?
Yes, Dr. Maddox,
Present.
Mr. Worthy, Ms. Davis. On this personnel addendum is a recommendation for hire for Alps Road Elementary School principalship. And that will make the 5th recommendation and potential hire out of the 7 vacancies that we have in the principalship right now.
All right. You have heard the recommendation from the superintendent. I have a motion to
I
accept.
move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for personnel.
And is there a second? Do we have a second? I will second the motion for the approval of the recommendations from the superintendent. Are you ready for the question? Yes? Question? Concerns? Yes?
I just wanna know, will we be ready in the fall for exit interviews? Because there were so many resignations, I really would be interested in that. Where are we with that process?
They're going out now.
They're going out?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, it's ready for the vote. All in favor of the personnel recommendations? Aye. Signify by raising your hand. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed? Same sign. Thank you. We have, motion is carried with the 5 yeas and 1 nay. Next is the action to approve the contract for the purchase of 1001 Prince Avenue.
Madam Chair, board members, we have had extensive conversations within the property committee structure about the potential purchase of this property on 1001 Prince Avenue. This contract for purchase is just that. It is not a formal purchase at all. It allows the district to carry out its due diligence in checking the life systems of the property. It allows the district to determine if the property is in a current state for purchase. So this action that we're asking you to take this evening is just for official approval so we can start our due diligence process.
All right, may I have a motion to act on approve the contract for 1001 Prince Avenue?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation on the 1001 Prince Avenue contract.
Thank you, Chair of the Property Committee. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Dykeman. Ready for the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, she's ready for the question.
All in favor? You know, when I say that, I'm actually asking for discussion.
I have a question.
So, isn't that how that's supposed to work? Did I-
Same thing.
Okay, so if there's discussion, yeah, we can do it during the questions. Yes, ma'am.
How long is the due diligence?
90 days.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I apologize that I wasn't able to be at the last property meeting. It is, the last thing that I remember is that, we had a current occupant.
There is a current tenant right now?
Yeah, and so that has been worked out, or are we still looking at a certain amount of time before we can move it?
There will be a time frame that we're unable to move into the property because the current tenant has a commitment. And so, and that current tenant intends to fulfill the life of their lease.
And that was through when again?
2025.
Any further questions? Yes.
Will there be a chance for board members to see the property, just to see what it looks like? Or is that,
To examine the property that we're purchasing?
yeah, just to see? Or is
I don't know if
that
that's-
not appropriate?
I don't, that's rare, that's a rare request, I don't know, Mr. Fisher, have we ever done that before?
Not my recollection, because I think district, we need to do due diligence ourselves first before we take anybody else.
I think once the purchase is completed, there is an opportunity for board members to tour the facility if that's your desire, but I think right now, the purpose of this action is to allow us to start the due diligence
Right,
process.
I understand.
If the purchase is completed, then absolutely, board members should be able to examine the property. I just want to clarify, yes, absolutely, we want to make sure that that's available to board members after the purchase is completed.
Okay, at any rate, so we have any other questions? All in favor? Let it be known by raising your right hand. Thank you. All opposed? We actually had a unanimous vote on that. Thank you. May I have a motion that completes the agenda for the special call meeting? May I have a motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn the special call meeting, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Worthy. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox. All in favor? Thank you. It's unanimous. It's unanimous. All right, we're done. That motion, that meeting is adjourned. I'm feeling so good about this. 8 minutes going. All right. May I have a motion that we go into, I now call the regular work session to order. We've already had a roll call from our special call meeting, so we won't repeat the roll call since we have no changes.
I think we should do another roll call,
All
since we had a
right.
board member
Weren't you here?
walk in.
I wanted to.
Oh, I apologize. Dr. Means, would you help us with the roll call?
Sure. Dr. Maddox?
Present.
Dr. Knox?
Here.
Mr. Worthy?
Here.
Ms. Davis?
Here.
Dr. Dykeman?
Here.
Dr. Berry?
Here.
Next, we are going to, the agenda is for our next month's meeting, so, we don't have any changes. We don't do an amend or adopt the agenda because it's for next week. Okay. So then, information items for the next meeting will be the early Head Start Policy Council meeting minutes and reports. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at those? Any questions or concerns? Excellent. The SPLOST monthly report. Questions or concerns? Any feedback for us? Anything you want to point out, Dr. Means? Jump in here anytime.
No.
Athens Community, that wasn't an invitation.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Go
Okay.
ahead. Jump ahead.
I wanted to defer to Dr. Maddox, who's also on that SPOS committee, to see if she had anything she would want to add. I was not at the May meeting, so.
Feeling good?
No.
All the projects that are currently in place are listed in that report. And they're the
Yeah,
same
the
projects
same,
from
so
last
nothing-
month.
There's
So
nothing new.
the financials are continuing to track in a positive manner, so I know that's all typically a concern of the board. We're in a good place from that perspective.
We meet next week.
Oh, great. Athens Community Career Academy report. Any questions or concerns about the Athens Community Career Academy report?
There was no report.
No, there's.
Oh, we don't have one. We'll have one next week. Or take it off the agenda, yeah.
I'm hoping to have one by next week.
Okay.
I'll check in with
So we'll
Mr.
look
Harris.
for it. All right, then parent advisory board report.
We really had a good meeting. Dr. Richard Milner from Vanderbilt University was present, and we had a chance to talk through the concept of equity and what that looks like and how parents can support it at that last meeting of the year.
Oh, great. I wonder if we could get them to come and visit with us and maybe report out next week to show us the history of it.
I don't know if they can do it next week, but I think
We can ask for that in the future.
we did talk about having some type of time with the parent advisory board. I'll work with their outgoing president
Great, thank you so much.
process.
Next would be the minutes of previous meetings. And there are 3 of those, right? The board work session, any corrections or changes to the board work session minutes? I hear none. The regular meeting on May 9th, any changes or corrections to that meeting minutes, to those meeting minutes? And for our special call meeting on May 16th, do we have any corrections or changes for those meeting minutes? You guys are doing a fantastic job over there. Thank you so very much. This is good. We are moving to item E on the agenda, which is the financial report. That's the April financial report. Do we have any questions or concerns about our April? Did you find more money for us?
Not yet.
All right, keep looking.
I still got a month left.
Still got a month left, all right. Any more, any corrections or questions about the financial report? On the financial statements? Moving forward, we're down to item E. That's gonna be our policy committee?
Or F.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's my
You're
glasses.
in policy.
We're in F, policy. Dr. Knox, sorry about that.
That's okay. So we've got several different policies to be posted for public review. Most of them are they're pretty pro forma, and they're listed up there. Purchasing, school admissions, foreign students, scheduling for instruction. And so I invite, if you haven't looked at them already, I invite you to look at them, so that we can get those out at the regular meeting.
You already had your meeting this month?
No.
Okay, good, it's coming, all right, thank you.
The next policy meeting is June 20th, I believe.
Okay, great, thank you, I could not remember.
And again, the policy committee has focused on completing B series policies and then taking a look at D policy and J policies. That's with the exception of policies that need to be addressed right away according to administration, hence the policy IED. So sometimes you will see some policies that are out of those series, and that's the reason why they're there.
Right.
But Dr. Knotts and Dr. Myers are working to work on a schedule, and that's the schedules.
Super, thank you. Any, item 2 on here would be the policies to adopt. Do we have any going up for adoption next week?
Yes. So we have several.
Okay,
We have the student code of conduct
yeah,
and
it's always a work of art.
federal family and medical leave, professional personnel leaves and absences, and community engagement policy. And so I think, do we have, is this, anybody know, is this the only public comment we've got?
Yes, sir.
Is that it? Thank you.
I didn't, yeah, that was at our desk, so yes. Do you have any comments on that, or?
I
No,
think, if I may, Dr.
Please,
Knotts,
please.
our Human Resources Department has looked at this request, and right now, it would be, the comment was regarding the ability under D1 of this policy to consider total years employed versus years consecutively employed. the comment was, can we consider total years employed? Our current system would require us to hand count. It's really hard to do that work of identifying total years of employed unless you go into each employee who is requesting this type of leave and do a hand count. Am I articulating that right?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Duke? And so when you consider consecutive years employed, that is more manageable from a software standpoint. So I just want to bring that up as, that's an operational challenge to us in terms of our current software configuration.
I don't have a second. I used to do that work. It's just a matter of making a priority, but okay, thank you very much. Any other concerns?
And you're right, I mean, I think that it could be, and we talked about this, and so Ms. Davis is absolutely right. So the comment from the public was, well, can you consider total years of employed versus consecutive years? Her comment is absolutely correct. It would mean someone would be responsible for just counting the extra, all the years total. I just wanted to bring it up because as internally, we said that would be a challenge. And we don't know how many of these we would receive on a year-to-year basis. If there are 30 in a year because we have vacancies, that could consume someone in terms of their job for months, potentially. We don't know. But we talked about it internally and said, we should at least let you know if you're gonna make changes in policy, how it may impact how we operationalize it. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't not consider it, it's just a consideration.
But I think that's important too, is to know that impact, and so I really appreciate this policy change, bringing that out. So, yeah, let's.
So,
Dr. Means, you said total of consecutive years, speaking in terms of just Clark County School District.
yes, in the Clark County School District.
Yeah, the reason I asked that because, and I don't think the law had changed in the state of Georgia, all of the school districts, you are allowed to bring 45 days with you. If you, let's say if you leave Walton County coming to Clark County, vice versa.
And is that included in your consecutive years?
Well, that's why I was asking the question, whether that would be.
This policy reads years of service in the Clark County School
In the
District.
Clark County School District, that's why I was asking that.
All right, it says GHRH.
It does.
It's just the print.
GBRH.
Thank you for that correction.
GB as in boy, or Brandon.
So, so in order to have that conversation, I'll send a couple of questions that I had to, because I honestly just saw this comment and it prompted those thoughts.
Sure.
So, yeah, I want to do a count. I'll send an email. All right, great. And we are now down to the superintendent's report.
Yes, ma'am. This was I'm deferring my time to visitors. And we have an out-of-town visitor here first. So if you don't mind, I would like to go in a different order with my report and have the audit, the 2018 audit report first. We're in the budget season. We're talking fiscal year 2020 right now. And we felt it would be good for the board and the community to hear the health that we're currently in with our finances. And so I'm gonna ask Mr. Hamill to introduce and invite our guests here. This presentation is actually through discussion and conversation that I had with prior board members who felt that on an annual basis, there should be some type of presentation to the Board of Education about the state of the financial affairs. And I shared with those board members that in my prior superintendency, this was a traditional presentation that we had where there was a reporting out of the audit findings to the board and to the community. So we would like to start this tradition. With that in mind, Mr. Hamill, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Means, board members, and participants tonight. I'd like to invite Janet Lester to come up. She is the audit manager in charge of the Athens office here in Atlanta, Georgia. And she's the one that was in charge of putting our audit together, reviewing the financial statements as presented to them by Ccsd. And she has some comments and some follow-up on the audit results for you.
A quick document for all the board members. I had training in Atlanta a month ago, and that's for management trainees. And one of the things that they make us do during our class or our training was to give a presentation in front of the class, a 3 to 5 minute presentation. They told us, as managers, one of the things you might have to do is report to the board. And I quipped, oh, we never have to go before the board. Okay, let me just tell you, this is payback. Somebody up there. And my mommy's always told me, no, don't ever say that you're not going to do something because it will come back to bite you. So, Mama, you're right. I'm sorry. So, real quick, I'm not really sure how much in depth y'all are expecting. We did finish the 2018 audit report. And you have to realize we're always a year behind. So what happens is the state fiscal year is July 1 through June 30th. The Board of Education doesn't actually have to submit their financial statements for the year ended June 30th until December 31st. So by the time we start our audits, we're already 6 months behind. So the information you're getting, it may not be really, really timely, but we do our best. So basically what happens in the process is Larry does a wonderful job preparing financial statements. I cannot sing his praises enough. We have a former director that does our financial statements for some of the boards. We have other board personnel that do not have experience and knowledge that Larry has. And he does a phenomenal job. So our job is to come and take his financial statements, take the notes to the financial statements, his exhibits, the schedules, and what we do is we go through and we determine whether or not the financial statements materially present the financial results of the board. And the way that we start is we take the financial statements that Larry has provided to us and we come up with a materiality basis. So for each of the major fund types, which is your general fund, your operating fund, your debt service fund, which pays for your debt, your general obligation bonds, and your capital projects fund, which is your construction accounts. We determine a material account balance, which is roughly 5% of the expenditures of each of those fund groups. And we determine based on that materiality figure, we take 75% of that, and that's what becomes our material account balance. Those are the accounts we're looking at in our audit process. We feel like if your material account balances are good, that anything that's not a material account balance above a certain threshold, it could all be wrong and you'll still be okay. Your financial statements will be materially presented. We always look at cash. If you don't have cash, you ain't got nothing. That's just a old saying. We always make sure your cash is right. We always make sure your investment accounts are right. We also look at your salaries and benefits. In a district this size, salary and benefits, as y'all well know here, 75–80% of your budget. We also look at your federal financial programs, anything that y'all get federal funding on. And we also audit from a compliance standpoint several of those programs each year. This year we did the child nutrition cluster, your school food service program, and your special ed program. So what we do is we look to make sure that the funding is received at the board and that the funds are spent appropriately. There's no problems. So everyone did a really, really wonderful job. Our responsibility is to make sure that financial statements are correctly presented. We also make sure that federal funds have been spent correctly. We had no problems this year. Your financial statements, your opinion was unmodified, which that's a clean opinion. It means y'all did everything wonderful, everything you're supposed to do. We had no audit findings this year. So we had nothing, no problems there. We also, so that's, Larry, everybody. That includes all the financial areas, all of your compliance areas like that. So that's really, really good. That's something you want to have. So good job, Larry, and everyone. We also had no management letter comments. So management letter comment would be something that doesn't rise to the level of an audit fund, but something we should bring to y'all's attention just to let you know, hey, this is not quite right. It's just something that maybe something just didn't get approved right. There was nothing like that this year. So there again, no management letter comments, no findings. Y'all are on a roll. This is really, really good. We did have 3 or 4 little comments, and these things, they're not very significant, but we had to report to the board member, the board chair and the superintendent, we had an exit conference. One of the things that we look at from the state compliance procedures is unclaimed checks, is any checks that are over a year old or 5 years old. And if there's payroll, it has a 1-year time frame. If it's a vendor check, you have 5 years. If that check is still outstanding after that time period, it's supposed to be refunded back to the state of Georgia. There was a change in employees during the year, and that amount just didn't get refunded. It was like $900, which is really nothing compared to the dollar amount we're looking at. But since it's a state compliance procedure, dollars don't get involved. It's just the fact either you did or you didn't do it. So we had to bring that to the attention of the board. The other 3 areas we had a little bit of problem with was child nutrition testing. Paula Farmer does an excellent job. Her and him, I mean, they have been wonderful. Paula is actually the person we give the name to at Boards of Education called Paula. Y'all need to know how to do something, call her. She can one can just, step you through everything. One of the things we found is that each day, I don't know how much I know about school lunch programs, but each day when children go through the line, they do a count. Even if the children eat free, they still have to count the number of students going through that line. That daily count gets reported. Each month, those daily accounts are accumulated and it's put onto an overall form for that particular school. There's another form that accumulates all the schools for that entire month and gets submitted to the Department of Education. One month, when they were re-reviewing the reports, they realized, we overclaimed a number of children as far as the count goes. Paula called it, they notified the Department of Education, and a refund was sent back to the Department of Education. Since that came to our attention, we just had to go ahead and point it out, because that's one of the things we test for. We test for accurate counting. Another area was, there was one employee in CNC, he was overpaid. She was overpaid by a few $100s. What happened is she went out on workers' comp, and the way that the payroll system works is you have to go in there and I think it's manually turn off so they won't get paid. They weren't sure how long she was going to be out, so they were going in there each month and just turning off that particular month. During the summer, something happened, some portion of the system, and it didn't get turned off. They found out about it. It was like $400. Here again, it's not a dollar amount. It's just the fact that it's federal compliance, it's federal dollars. We have to report that. The last thing we had is child nutrition cluster equipment listing. Each school has a listing of all of their school equipment items that they use every day in their kitchen. And there's specific requirements they have to have. They have to have the dollar amount, the description, an asset ID number, the source of the fund, the condition of the actual item, the use of the item. And then there were 2 items that had gotten disposed of that the listing did not get updated for. Here again, it's not necessarily a dollar amount, it's just a compliance issue. So that, if you look at the total budget for the school system and the amount of dollars and amount of students coming here, this is a glowing report. I cannot commend y'all on a better report. Like I say, Larry, everybody in the finance department, everyone in human resources, everyone in payroll, the IT department, school food, special, everyone we dealt with has always gone above and beyond. They do an excellent job. They support us. They make our job so much easier. Y'all are really, really fortunate to have such a great staff. Are there any questions? I talk fast. I probably, I hate doing this prep. People get real nervous. So
The mother would be proud.
Yeah. My job is really, really easy because all I can do is, like I say, Larry was with our department in the past. I don't know if all of y'all know that or not. So he knows what I know. So he does a really, really good job. He makes our job so much easier. Actually, whenever we come to do the audit, Larry has everything for us on a quick drive in his wonderful audit box. And he's also a really, really good teacher. So some of our newer staff that's less experienced, Larry will sit them down and teach them how to do the audit. So really, he's made our job so much easier. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's drinking from a fire hydrant, but did anybody have questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's Carol Williams, who has always wanted us to be a part of this, so thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Wow.
So the second, I think Mr. Hamill and his entire team, and I think the statement was accurate. We have good people who are doing good work, but more importantly, we have systems in place that prevents the misuse of funds. And so our financial health is strong. And Mr. Hamill has my full confidence and support in ensuring that those systems are enforced throughout the school system. We were just chatting earlier today about how one of his team members went out and worked with all the bookkeepers at our schools to close out the school year in a way that was very supportive, and how the bookkeepers at each of the schools felt that they're better supported by Larry and his team because of the systems and procedures and expectations that have been laid out. So again, thank you, Larry, and Ms. Hill, who's in the back, who runs our special education department. There's a lot of millions of dollars that she's overseeing. It took a team effort, as you heard earlier, to make this audit report strong. Madam Chair, board members, I'm going to transition. There was a request in the fall to bring back a report around our career technical and agricultural education program in the Clark County School District. So I would ask Dr. Ramirez, who is the coordinator of this portion of our academic and instructional program, to come to the front and provide a presentation. I would just note for your information that there is a folder with a lot of information. One request that I had for Dr. Ramirez was to create some type of newsletter. I'm very, very happy, very proud of this newsletter that Dr. Ramirez worked with staff members to create an overview of what's happening in CTAE. So again, this is just a follow-up to a request from the board in terms of information around CTAE and Ccsd. Dr. Ramirez.
Thank you. Well, good evening, honorable members of the school board, Dr. Means, fellow colleagues, and members of the public. Each year around this time, we come before you for approval of our local CTAE application and the use of our federal and state funds. In your packets, you will see a CTAE scorecard, and that scorecard has 3 areas of membership, programs, and communication. I'll be speaking to each of those 3 areas, as well as the area of core performance indicators, which are required for all districts that receive federal Perkins funds. Under membership, this slide shows a 5-year enrollment trend data for our middle schools and high schools. And you will note that we have been servicing an increasing number of students each year. And if you do the math correctly, you should come to a number of a 27% growth from 2015 to 2019. I anticipate this growth to continue into next year. BHL is adding a pathway program in computer science, and Hillsman Middle School is also adding a business and finance program at the school. Under programs, we have spent a considerable amount of time and effort in really looking at our coherence and our alignment from middle school to high school to the career academy. And if I can highlight the, there we go. Let me see. It's moving very slowly.
What are you
There's
doing?
a hyperlink.
What are you going to do?
Ah, well. Oh no. Well, in your packets is a graphic organizer of the slide I was going to show you. That graphic organizer, yes, this is the one. That's the one in your packets. Okay, this graphic organizer represents the work that has taken place this year in terms of aligning our middle school pathways to our high schools and the career academy. The pathways that are highlighted in blue and also in italics are the proposed future pathway programs. The pathways that are not highlighted are the pathways that we are offering for the 2019-2020 school year. I also, on the programs, want to highlight the Clark Central Graphic Design Department and the achievement of 100% of the graphic design students successfully passed their end of pathway assessment, thus earning a industry recognized certifications. Yes. Kudos to them. In the area of communication, as Dr. Means just pointed out, we launched a new CTAE newsletter. This newsletter will provide teachers with the opportunity to highlight the work they're doing with students, the work not only in the classroom, but the work they do with students, with student organizations as they go out and compete at local, regional, and national competitions, the work they're doing with employability skills, and also provides us with an opportunity to thank our business and industry partners for all the support they show to Clark County schools, especially those businesses and industries that help our students with work-based learning placements. We do anticipate doing 2 publications per year, and we're going to have a contest for students and classrooms to name the CTAE newsletter prior to the next publication. I'm still thinking about what prize we should give them, but I always know that a pizza party is appropriate to all grade levels. Lastly, our core performance indicators. The core performance indicators are set by the United States Department of Education in consultation with each state. Under Perkins 5, that will no longer be the case. Each state is now responsible for setting its own performance indicators as long as those indicators apply equally to all students. For the 2017-2018 school year, you would note the column to the far right. Did Ccsd meet the core indicator? You would know that we met 7 out of the 8 performance indicators. And in the area that we did not meet, we actually moved in the positive direction from last year's indicator. And that area is the non-traditional participation by gender groups. What that refers to is, for example, males who are enrolled in cosmetology or females enrolled in automotive. Now, all these indicators are going away for next year. So we are awaiting the new indicators as soon as they're published by the Georgia Department of Education. There's also a hyperlink for the data that you're able to have additional information on data by special populations and the comparison between last year and this year. And lastly, the work for this coming school year, the development of a 5-year strategic plan and being mindful to have equity and access in mind by the offering of similar programs at both high schools and the feeder schools. In addition, high priority is obviously the implementation of Perkins 5. And lastly is advancing the attainment of industry certification for all programs for the next 2 years. This is just some of the most important work before us for next year. And with that, I thank you, and I'll entertain any questions.
So if you go back one slide.
Absolutely.
That one question, advancing attainment of industry certification.
Yes.
Is that only going to be eligible, will only Career Academy students be eligible for that? Is that something that middle school students can get certification in?
Normally, the program certification that applies to all pathways at the high school level. It's normally at the high school level.
Okay, very good.
Where no, it takes about 2 years for us to be industry certified. We have one program in Clark County Schools, Cedar Shoals, our automotive program, has been industry certified. And there are various elements. It includes having an active student organization. It includes having an active advisory board. It includes having a teacher that's certified. And it also requires that students compete local or regional events. And also having a facility adequate enough to pass industry standards.
That's awesome. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions? Or Dr.
Thank you.
Pierce? All right, that's great. Okay, moving right along. We are now at the section, I'm sorry. Did you finish your report?
That's the conclusion of the superintendent's report.
Thank you. All right, section H. Anybody have any questions for our superintendent? We're moving forward to section H, which is consent agenda and discussion. And of course, number one on the consent agenda is always approval of field trips. Any questions about the field trips? Okay, we're gonna pull the approved fiscal year 2020 budget from consent, is that right, or is there?
Well, I guess if there are any questions, I just want to go over the timeline again. So we made Larry and I made a presentation to the board at our May 9th work session. We then had a special meeting for the board on May 23rd to answer any questions. 6 of our current 8 board members, no, actually 7 of our 8 board members attended our 3 budget hearings that were conducted. 2 were last week and 1 was this Tuesday. So I think there have been a lot of questions addressed and answered. Again, this was a conversation that came out of the finance committee and board members talking with me. We developed a document that kind of, I believe, gives a high level analysis of our budget and what we're proposing. It gives some detail around the positions that we're suggesting for adoption. So this is another forum for questions if board members have them. I know that there were a few questions forwarded this afternoon from the board, and we've attempted to answer those. One question that was posed was, at our last budget hearing, there was an exchange regarding the charter system dollars and if fund balance could be used to fill the void that is potentially there if the recommendation from administration is to pull $450,000 from that funding to pay for SEL positions. During that exchange, we talked a lot about, there was a portion where we talked about a cardinal rule that you don't want to violate in school finance, which is you don't want to use fund balance to pay for personnel. And so I think the question, when I went back and reviewed the video, when I was reviewing or when I was responding to the question of can you use fund balance to backfill an offset in charter dollars, I was in that mindset of can you use that dollar amount then to pay for personnel?
Yeah, and I think that was her first question.
And so that's where my answer came from. I was in that space of no, you don't want to do that. But can the board use fund balance? So let's just play this one through. Can the board use fund balance to backfill the $450,000 that is being recommended by administration to pay for SEL positions? Can you backfill it and use fund balance to provide it to LSGTs and allow them to continue to have innovation grant dollars? The answer is yes, pending board approval. Also, Mr. Hamill and I would say, and also pending that those dollars are being used for one-time cost. If it's being used for personnel, then we would not advise you, not recommend the use of fund balance dollars in that way. I think the other
Innovation grant dollars in that way.
Why?
Yeah, I think, from being on an LSGT, and I don't know if this happened on all of them, but we were always told not to use that money for a ongoing position. Because for that very reason that you're not sure whether that is going to be.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm a little bit concerned about dipping into the fund balance now. And I'll tell you the reason why. I read your email, Dr. Knox, and very clear. I think you said we up to around 38 point whatever percent for fund balance. But,
I'm sorry, can I interject on that?
okay.
The 30-something is what it was currently in the month of which it was being reported.
Okay.
The actual fund balance that will be at the end of June, based on all the expenditures through June and accruals, will actually be in the 18 to 19% range.
And that's what Dr. Knox had in his email, but my concern is this, and Mr. Hammond, you said, I don't know whether it was in the last financing meeting or not, the state is already predicting, they have a vision on this, that revenue is going to be down. And if we go where we were, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, you start dipping into the fund balance now, even though it's healthy. 2 years from now, or a year from now, you may have to use that money wisely. Now, that's just my interpretation of it, because we went through that several years ago. And we ended up having to cut programs, and finally we had to cut personnel. And then finally, and I think some of you all recall all of this too, we had to actually go to furlough people. But I'm just thinking ahead. And I could be totally wrong. I can't predict the future, but it has happened before.
I think one of the other things that we've learned through the budget hearings is that there's clearly angst around our recommendation to use innovation grant dollars to offset or to cover the cost for the SEL positions that we're recommending. And I appreciate the feedback that the community's provided, members of the community have provided. We're struggling as an administrative team because we want to offer a balanced budget. So any conversation around using fund balance is in essence deficit spending.
Yes.
And so fiscally, we believe in providing a balanced budget. And so we've come up with a pathway for a balanced budget, but the way to get to that balanced budget is through using the innovation grant dollar. That's our recommendation. If there is, I guess administratively where we are struggling, where I am struggling, is that strategic priority number 2 clearly talks about the support of social emotional learning for our kids in the district. That's in our strategic plan. Providing funds to local school governance teams to use for innovation grant dollars or innovation grant ideas is not in the strategic plan. And so we're simply trying to construct a budget that honors and supports the strategic plan that this board has enacted. If the feedback is that we shouldn't use innovation grant dollars, we're at a loss in terms of where we can find the funds to support that initiative. And so then eventually what happens is that the kids don't receive more counselors and social workers and school psychologists. That doesn't happen. Or we go into that list of initiatives that we have, and potentially you don't have a middle school alternative ed program. But when that happens, that means those kids are going back into the middle schools in which they misbehaved in. So that's our challenge in regards to the budget. I guess the last thing I would share is that as Mr. Hamill and I went out and had our hearings, our budget hearings, there's a perception that we have a lot of funds, and I think the property values in Clark County are healthy, and the mill rate of 20 is very generous of the community. But there's a chart in the budget handbook. There's a chart in our presentation that shows there's almost $21 million worth of positions that we fund on an annual basis that's not funded through the QBE, which is the state funding source. There's another chart in that document that shows the state gives us a little over $1 million for transportation, yet we spend over $7 million in transportation costs overall. There's gaps in what we are providing in terms of a service delivery model and what we actually receive funds for. There was also a question around the average class sizes, and does that average class size that we computed for the district, does that relate to an average class size in every school across the district? It may not be that exact number in every school, but it's an average. Ms. Duke and I looked at that information today. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the number that you're going to find in every school, in every classroom, but on average, that is the class size that we're providing to the school district, which are very low class sizes. And so in order for us to balance a budget and live up to our strategic plan, we're at a crossroads. And I've heard from at least one board member who said, I'm not voting for this budget because of the use of the innovation grant dollars. I respect the fact that that board member has been so transparent in making that statement. We're now at a loss administratively in regards to how to implement our strategic plan and to continue to be fiscally prudent.
Yes.
I think that primarily, my question is maybe it's not about where we are, but how we got here. So it is stated in the budget proposal at the website, and I noted this today in the budget document that this proposal to use the innovation funds was developed and vetted through school principals and district leaders. And so my question was, to what degree were the LSGT members involved in that vetting process and in the decision-making process? So it might not be where we are, but how we got here.
Right.
Those are my questions. And that's what I'm hearing from constituents, is a worry about how much input for this particular decision was removed from the local governance teams. And so I'm wondering, when you mentioned that the proposal was vetted and voted on, how many local school governance team members were involved in that vetting and in that decision-making process?
They weren't,
Okay.
because the construction of the district budget doesn't involve local school governance teams. It is really an administrative function. And so candidly, us engaging our building principals was something that was rare, that typically doesn't happen in the school district. Typically, the construction of the district budget has happened with district administrators. So in an effort to be collaborative, I felt it was important to bring principals along because it was going to impact the local schools so much and so significantly. And so that's why they were brought along in the process. Ms. Suggs has engaged her advisory board. There's a charter system advisory board, and they've been advised and they've been supportive of this recommendation and initiative. But no, there was no survey that went out to each individual local school governance team member or every LSGT for their feedback, because the usual and customary pathway of developing a district budget for the board's review is a duty and responsibility of the district administration. So that's how we landed here. Actually, we were more collaborative than normal, but that collaboration did not cascade down to the actual local school governance team members themselves. And that's why in the budget book, we actually lay out the concept of a charter system starts with the system, not with each individual local school governance team site as, or team being an entity that you have to run past district issues. This is a district a district duty and a district responsibility, and that's why we took the path that we've taken.
I have a question about understanding all that, that's all good. What I remember from the presentation was that we don't have, the decision from the principals was that they didn't get requests to use the innovation money. And so if the requests are there, or they come in later, what is that process for them to get funding? Even if we had exhausted all of the innovation grant money, if something came up that was really innovative, then that would come back to your doorstep for you to try and find money to make that happen.
We had a really rich conversation. The exchange was lively. I think it was Tuesday. We had our last, on June 4th, where we had our last budget hearing session. And the comment was, so if the innovation grant dollars are gone, what funds are available to a school to continue to be innovative? And we cited there's still title dollars available to schools. It's just a matter of deciding how you're going to use your title dollars and how innovative you want to be with said dollars. So there's still dollars available to schools and ultimately their local school governance teams to weigh in and to determine how they want to be innovative with their dollars. And you're absolutely right. If a school principal and or their local school governance team says we're out of title dollars and you reallocated our innovation grant dollars, but we have a really innovative idea, then those ideas should come to the district. And we want to collaborate with those school sites to say, let's move this forward. And we have a rich tradition of this. And the rich tradition of it is what we're doing with the dual language immersion program. That was prior to us becoming a charter system. And there was a principal in a school community who said, we have an innovative idea. Can you help us and support us in moving that forward? The school district continues to pay out of our professional learning budget for the professor in residence for Oglethorpe Avenue Elementary School. We could have a long time ago gone to the Oglethorpe LSGT and said, you should use your innovation dollars to pay for the PIR that's supporting the dual language immersion program. We haven't done that because we do believe in that innovation.
Dr. Means, I would add in our textbook request, we have included the dual language immersion textbooks coming out of instructional services, and that's something they've used the innovation funds for in the past. But now the district will pay for those textbooks that they need to support that program.
I think that, thank you, Mr. Gaskins. I think the narrative around this conversation has been very either or, and it can be a yes and so innovation doesn't go away because the innovation grant dollars have gone away. In fact, I think it ushers in an opportunity for greater collaboration. But this should not stunt the innovation or opportunity for local school governance teams to have ideas. There's still a pathway to engage with district staff to make those innovations become alive and viable and something that can be implemented for kids right away.
That's good to know. Any other concerns, questions for our, we're talking about our still budget?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a perspective that I think that why this is bubbling up is because I think that people feel like the roles of the LSGTs are different than what they expected, and I know we've talked about this before, and that was prior to you coming in, but people had an idea of what the LSGTs were going to be, and so they feel like the role of the LSGTs have been minimized over time, and while the innovation grants shouldn't be like the thing that the LSGTs do, they are something that they did feel like they had control over, and now they feel like that's being taken away. So the perception, I think, is that, well, now you're not even letting us do this anymore. So, I don't think that's true. I think people are generally in support of the SEL initiative. I think people think that all of those ideas are really good, but it feels like this is being taken from them. And so I think that is why there have been so many questions about it, and why people have felt like a 75% cut in this is it hurts them. So I think that's why that has come up. And then just based on what you were just saying, I think, and something that Dawn said the other day too, is that a lot of the district initiatives have come from people having innovative ideas at the school level. And that if you have an innovative idea at the school level and then it works at your school level, then maybe this is something that we want to do district-wide, which I think is great, but also makes me feel like that's what this money does, is it allows people to pilot that at their school level and see if it works, and if it does, then maybe they do it again, or maybe it gets scaled up. And without having this kind of pool of money, it feels riskier.
So there's always a pool of funds. The pool of funds are either title dollars or working with your district administration. It could be Mr. Gaskins, it could be Ms. Hill in special education, it could be with Dr. Myers, and approaching them and saying, we have an idea, can we work with you? So that innovation isn't being taken away. The other component that I think gets lost in this change is, and there's still $150,000 of innovation grant dollars available. It's more in a competitive grant model versus the distribution model of every school getting a certain portion. So innovation isn't going away. If you have a great idea, submit a grant and it could be honored. The other element of this is we're encouraging through that competitive grant model the collaboration and partnership of multiple schools. You're eligible for a greater or a larger amount of grant dollars, and that emphasizes and supports our original charter of creating community schools. So the example that I've provided in multiple hearings is if Hillsman and Gaines submitted a joint grant, they would probably get a greater look through that process of analyzing and vetting the grant applications, because they are promoting a community school model. So but I do want to acknowledge, I understand the concerns. I hear the concerns. And I think during your training as a board this winter, we talked about the fact that unfortunately the charter system has been regulated to how do we use our innovation grant dollars versus looking at Appendix B of all the different roles and responsibilities of a local school governance team. The greatest responsibility is ensuring that there is school progress and academic progress happening at the school site, and ensuring that there's oversight happening locally. That's the main role of an LSGT. But unfortunately, our analysis and our description of the charter system has been skewed, I think, in a way because we haven't really dug deep and talked about true school achievement and improvement, and what does that work look like, and how can local school governance team members help that process.
And I do, we did have an email from someone that very specific, this person very specifically stated that the district was by using the innovation funds going against the charter rules, and I also want to make clear that is not true. The district can spend the innovation funds. And then I will just conclude and won't say anything else, but I think there's a difference between what you can do and what you should do. And so I do, even though you didn't have to pull in LSGT into the decision-making process, I wonder if it would have been worthwhile to do that. It would have made everything a lot easier, so, or a lot less, but it would have maybe helped with the perception about the care that Dr. Dyken was talking about with how the decision was made. So that's my only real thing.
And I appreciate that, Dr. Berry. I appreciate the feedback. So I'll be candid with you. I think since arriving in the district, I have struggled with what is the role of the district. And there has been a perception of if every single element of district operations should go through the local school governance teams, then I question what is the role of our district team. So you're right, we could have gone to the LSGTs, and I don't know what the results would have been. I don't know. But I think by even introducing that concept to the conversation, it is, I believe, is watering down the role of district leadership and what our responsibility is in managing and leading the district. That's been very cloudy since I've arrived in terms of, so is there do we have a school system or a system of schools? And that's, I think that's the prevailing conversation that's behind a lot of this. Do we have a school system or a system of schools? Again, I'm very empathetic and I'm listening closely to the feedback from people who are saying, well, no, we want our innovation grant dollars. I think that's fair and duly noted, I'm hearing it. But I also hope through that exchange, people can understand the challenge that we collectively have as a district team, and I have in this role of, so where do we fit in? If that's the perception of very vocal community members of the local school governance teams should steer where our system of schools go, then I question, then what is the school system for? And what's our role? So I think this is a healthy conversation to have publicly because it's been an undercurrent. This is not an attempt to minimize the charter system. In fact, if we weren't a charter system, we wouldn't have this $450,000 to potentially move into supporting our kids and supporting our strategic priority. So when we really think about the conversation, are we talking about the access and control of funds by local school governance teams, or are we talking about leveraging the dollars that have been given to us because we are designated a charter system to help all of our kids? I want to have that conversation. I think right now the conversation has been, something's been taken away from local school governance teams. I want, as a school system, to provide certain, and I don't think anyone debates that, but I think I want to have the conversation of how do we best provide these services for all of our kids in a way where constituents, stakeholder groups have shared with me, that's what they want to see in the Clark County schools.
Coming from a rural area and also being on the governance team in Winterville, I really have a strong opinion about this, which is why I'm quiet. But first of all, I agree with Ms. Berry. First going back to Avid and now with this, you know, like she said, yeah, although you didn't have to, and I understand and hear your points on that, it's just to me a matter of respect with the governance teams because we were led to believe that we would have certain responsibilities, and then not to have another follow-up conversation, but all the way going back all the way to Avid, and we're going to talk with just the principals, and this is just the way it's going to be. And now here we are again. I do feel some kind of way as a governance member who dedicated a lot of time and energy to my team, just like other governance members. And it's not about, I know Kara said about feeling that control, but when we were planning our programming for our school, it wasn't about control. It was about what are the best things that we can do for these rural kids here at Winterville. And I have concerns that, just like before, the Chase, the Oglethorpes, the Timothys, the Barrows, I don't see the money I don't have the faith that the money is going to be spent or the grants are going to be given out fairly. I haven't seen that yet, so, and I know I don't stand alone on that. So that's where I stand. And we talk about we want the best for all children, but we can't put them all in the same baskets. The needs at Winterville are going to be different from the needs at other schools. Plus, we have Compass at Winterville. We have a lot of things shifted at Winterville that I feel are just unfairly weighted when it comes to other schools. And so we have a music program that many of those students would not have the opportunity to have if they were, on their own. And I believe that indirectly affects their social and emotional because they're able to direct that behavior and other things another way through that music. So, you know, that's the way I feel about it. I'm truly against this.
So, I hope, it was,
Yes.
Mr. Worthy, and then I have a question.
Couple of things. We, as a board, the LSGT teams, they gotta follow their role, folks. Their role is not to plan with the administration of this school district to plan the budget. That's the same as our role. We don't have any business having our fingers into planning the budget. The budget is planned and presented to us. Now, if they wanted to know more about it, they should have attended these budget hearings. Now, I've gotten some calls about this, et cetera. In fact, got one today. Now, I'm hearing the flip side of this. Some of this innovation funds, these teams didn't even use it. They didn't even use the money. I didn't use all of the money up during the year. Now, listen to this. I went through this as a principal. I said, there, when I appropriate the funds for you now, you either spend it or you lose it. Because you won't have it next year. I wonder whether any of the board members heard that these teams did not use all of the money that was appropriated for them.
Okay, so,
To me, it's theoretical as well.
But it's still not their role to be planning the budget with the superintendent and his staff. That's the same as the board. We don't have any business doing that. The budget is planned and it's presented to us.
so let me take us back to the agenda item at this point, because I'm not sure where the discussion is going. I think we've heard both several sides of everything, and.
Well, this is
But where do we
informative,
go with
Madam
this?
Chair.
Because
Yeah.
we gotta get to a place where we either are comfortable with our roles and how the budget has been presented to us. But what I heard in this discussion tonight is there is no loss for anybody. I didn't hear that there's a loss for the LSGTs. I didn't hear that there wasn't a way for innovation to continue to happen, just as it happened before the LSGTs. I did hear a new concern from you, Dr. Maddox, that there's no equity, I guess, in terms of how the funds are being distributed. But, yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, so we don't know that, right?
Right,
That's not what I said.
she doesn't have
No,
confidence.
based on the culture, based on where we be.
She doesn't have
I don't have
confidence.
faith that
Yes.
it will be. That's what I meant.
Okay, so that's just a concern that it might not happen. I don't know. Okay. I don't know how to address that, so I guess is that yours to address?
It was my
or
comment,
yours?
it was like not really.
You don't want to
It's her
address,
perspective.
not to address it, we're good?
She just doesn't have confidence that the system may work out to be fair to all schools. I understand.
So you're good?
I think this is very informative for me, Madam Chair and board members, because here's our challenge. We could stay consistent with what we've recommended, and there's a possibility the budget is going to be voted down. And so then what do? We could move from month to month until there's resolution. That's a possibility. So we could move into fiscal year 2020 with no resolution. And Mr. Hamill, can you talk through what that process looks like?
Sure.
Because we have started the planning, understanding where people may be from a board. I haven't heard directly from board members in terms of where they stand, but we are strategically planning for all options.
So there's two proposals that need to be adopted next week. There's the budget and their millage rate. We have to adopt the millage rate. We don't have a choice. First of all, the millage rate has to be adopted because the county's got to adopt their millage rate. Then we have to, Mr. Pruitt has to take the information where it's been adopted, go to the tax commissioner's office. There's a lot of paperwork they got to get done. They have to come back, get Dr. Means to sign off on it. If that's not done before June 30th, the tax levy cannot be issued and the tax bills cannot be sent out, and they're due October 1st. So there's a small time frame. Now, if we do not adopt the budget, then what we have to do is called ongoing resolutions every month. Every month I'll have to come to you and ask to spend 1/12 of the previous year's budget, which is $151 million, every month going forward. But there's a caveat with that. There are $3K increase in teacher salaries and a 2% increase in classified, and there's a step increase. I can't pay that with a $151 million budget. So if you come to me, I cannot approve these pay increases based on the way the current budget is for 19.
So the translation, just so I want to make sure that it's clear, if we go to the month-to-month model because of an unresolved budget, the $3,000 increase that has been built into the budget through the state, or the 2% increase for other employees who are not teachers, would not be provided to employees.
Would not be effective July 1. And in fact, if we go 4 or 5 months, they won't get that money until the budget's finally approved, which means at that point we have to catch up.
And you also mentioned the step increases.
Yes, sir.
There's a whole bunch involved with that.
Yes, sir.
And you're gonna have some angry teachers.
Yep.
Let me say something in conjunction with what Dr. Maddox said and also in support of what she said. And you're correct, we had the same problem several years ago with Title I funds. And I'm sitting here racking my brains in terms of how we solved that, but we solved it. Because there were some schools who were not getting what they should have been getting, but we solved that. But give me some time, I gotta come up with what we did, okay?
I think it's worthwhile having this conversation.
Sure it is.
Right, so.
No, I think it's healthy.
That's where I'm left
I agree.
as well. I think that
I agree.
we're talking about more transparency, so let's have a detailed, again, another, in-depth conversation so that the community is even more educated about the decision-making process. So I'm happy that we have the conversation.
So what Mr. Hamill and I are going to decide to do in the next week is, do we modify our proposal so we don't put our employees in this position? Or do we stay firm in what we've presented because we believe it's strategically focused and we're putting our employees in the middle of what I believe, so we're going to talk transparency, what I believe to be is a philosophical challenge that the board and I are having, which is, so what is the role of district administration? What is the role of the superintendent? What is the purview of the superintendent? What is this person, what is the role supposed to be and do? And I think the community has weighed in on this as well. If there's a perception based on how the charter system was presented by my predecessor and others before I arrived, of this would be a system of schools, that's not how the job was presented to me when I arrived. And if you want me to lead in that way, I think there have been subtle messages, but I need to hear it clearly. I've heard it clearly from some members of the community of that's what's desired. I care too much about teachers and our employees to put their compensation in the middle of this. So the feedback that has been presented this evening will weigh heavily on me. And I have to make a decision on, do we stay consistent with what we're presenting, or do we make a modification by $450,000? Because my commitment of having a balanced budget remains true. Because that goes into strategic priority number 3 of organizational effectiveness. It goes into strategic priority number 4 of fiscal health. So this is a challenge. This is, I think, is a very transparent, open issue of where do we collectively want to be as a district administrative team, and then as a governing board, and how do we collaborate and work together? Because right now, what's at risk? What's at risk is that we have thousands of people who are counting on compensation increases that may be delayed if one side says, we're not budging, we're not moving, this is a solid presentation of a budget, and so that means we're just going to go month to month.
That's not going to work, Dr. Mean. Mr. Hammer explained this explicitly. Now, one thing he didn't say, some of these raises are going to take place the 1st of July. 248-day employees, and maybe a few others. And from the past, when the state built into the budget to give a raise, that raise would take place for, let's say, teachers for the month of September, because their pay during the summer from June, July, and August already been prorated. So that they're looking forward to a raise the 1st of September.
So Mr. Hamill, can you be I want you to be very clear, because there's a difference between people looking forward to dollars and us not having a resolution by the end of June. What happens to salaries?
So if we don't approve the budget and we go into July with a resolution, I cannot put the 2% step increases for those people that will receive it starting July 1 for their July 15 paycheck.
Very
Now,
expensive.
Mr. Worthy is correct. The 3,000K starts with the September 1st new contract, that time period.
So what does that mean to our budget overall? So if that $3,000 is going to be drawn down one way or another, that means we are short, because the last year's budget was 151 million. We are proposing a budget next year for 165 million. And so there's a gap.
Yep.
And so if there's a gap, what does that mean for us? Because if the $3,000 will be withdrawn one way or another, that means we're, give or take, $14 million short somewhere else in our cost centers. What does that mean for you and our financial health?
So revenue-wise, as long as you approve the millage rate and we get those tax bills out, we will still draw down the state revenue and get our tax money the way we're supposed to. So that's not going to change. The problem is you have not authorized an expenditure bill of $165 million. So if I have to go to a month-to-month resolution, the only bill I have left to go on as a base model is that which you approved from fiscal year 19. In fiscal year 19, there are no step increases, there's no 3,000K, there's no 2% increases for those people. Even though I'll be getting money from the state, I can't pay it out because you haven't authorized it to be paid out. That's right.
Yes, sir.
I have a few questions. With regard to the balanced budget, could you explain how the situation that was described with using fund balance, how is this different than last year's budget where we were paying money for, I believe, the ELA books and so forth? How would those two things be different?
I'll let Larry start.
So in fiscal year 19, our balanced budget was purely revenue versus expenditures. So there was no fund balance being used to balance the budget that year. In the current year, back in 2019, I believe it might have even been at the end of 2018, the board authorized $1.75 million to be spent out of fund balance over 3 years for ELA. So in the current budget, in the current expenditure budget, there's $688,000 of expenditures for ELA. So because of that ELA money in the budget, we're using part of that 1.75 fund balance to pay for that ELA. Now what I could have done is come in here with a budget without ELA, and it would have been balanced. And then I could have come back to you after the board was approved and said, by the way, you approved $1.75 million for ELA. We're going to spend that, and here's the expenses we're going to spend on it. But we decided to bring it all up front in one budget and present it to you at once.
I think there's an accounting answer and there's a philosophical answer. And the philosophical answer is that when I first arrived during the 17-18 school year, staff members shared with me that the number one concern was our ELA program. And when we looked at the ELA, and you've heard this before, but for those who haven't, when we went through our 14 elementary schools, there were seven different ELA programs being used with our kids. And so, and we talked trauma and poverty, but what we didn't talk about was there's kids who are, they move, they're mobile. And so we literally had kids going from one elementary school to the other, and they were using different ELA programs. And then we were surprised that our milestone data at ELA was low. And so we felt philosophically that there was a crisis when it came to our instruction around ELA. And that's why we came to the board to say, we need to use these funds. And it's not a one-time cost, but it's at least a 5 to 7 year cost, because that's how long these materials should last us. I think the other challenge that the ELA adoption highlighted for our school system, and I think you brought this up as a board a few months ago, is we did away with a textbook adoption line item in the budget, and we started just adopting laptops. And we were substituting laptops for instructional materials. That's not healthy for a school district of 14,000 students to not have a healthy line item for textbooks. And so that was another challenge, Dr. Knox, in regards to why we had to come to the board for fund balance. So A, there was a crisis, but B, there had never been dollars put in place for a healthy line item of a district our size for textbooks.
And Dr. Knox, there are funds in the textbooks that are being used in the regular budget in relationship to the fund balance you approved as well for ELA.
That's, please note my language, a healthy line item for a district the size of 14. We have a line item for textbooks, but it's not commensurate with what
Correct.
we need to have for a district our size.
Another question about fund balance and the percentage. Let me go back to Larry. Just to be clear, we have the rule basically for 15%. That is there basically as rainy day for when things go bad, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the question I have is, are we supposed to have money for more than a rainy day? 18, 19, 20% or more?
So every school system around us, Mr. Knox, has more than 15%. In fact, some schools are in the 20s now. And the reason is they're building their fund balance up because of historical changes that have been forced on them by schools, by the state in terms of austerity cuts or unfunded mandates. So if they get an unfunded, so go back to the presentation where it goes back to 2014, and we weren't getting $8 million in QB funds, and we were having the TRS increased on us, and we were having healthcare increase on us. You notice we had deficits every single one of those years going forward because we just weren't getting the funds. And we decided we weren't going to cut all of our teachers or art, music, PE, that we were going to try to hold on to those people and have furloughs. So there's a time and place for fund balance to be used, but if you don't build it up for those rainy days like this, you don't have it to use. And then you will be cutting positions.
Okay. I just asked that because I've been on the board for 2.5 years and I've never been clear on whether we're supposed to be at 50%. Are we supposed to be significantly above it?
So
what other districts are doing? That's always been
So the
point of
15%
confusion.
is what the Department of Audits says is advisable. Yes, I was trying to look for the right word.
Yes.
Advisable. But I will tell you that almost every school system around us is in the high teens, low 20s right now.
So in other words, just to kind of help with the conversation, is the 15% the floor or the ceiling?
Yep. Recommended.
Is it the recommended floor or is it the recommended ceiling?
I guess you could
No,
say. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't think it's a ceiling on it.
That's the point of the question.
So if you want to be blunt about it, I would say it's a recommended ceiling.
But it's also important to say, Dr. Lease and Mr. Hammer, school districts cannot operate without a fund balance in the state of Georgia. So when you start, like I said earlier, you see a healthy fund balance, well, you know how people are, spend. Tell them about DeKalb County.
Yes, sir.
That's why DeKalb County was put on probation for their accreditation, and Michael Thurman had to move in and get them off.
So my last year at DeKalb, before I came here as a CFO, I developed a cash flow analysis to help them because we were not getting the funds from our property tax. They had took a huge dive. Right before I left, I had to figure out how much money we're going to do a TAN for. We had to do an $80 million TAN just to keep us afloat through December 31st.
Was that because they were out of fund balance? Or
That
almost out?
because they had used their fund balance over the years.
Okay, so I want to be clear, because when we say fund balance, sometimes it almost means different things to different people.
Right.
So they were down to zero.
No, they weren't
Or
down to
close.
zero,
Okay.
but they didn't have $80 million in a fund balance to cover the expenditures. And we were trying to draw more money down because the problem we were facing was the tax digest was dropping so fast. We didn't know how much of that tax that had been levied we were going to get. And also, the CAB at the time gets their money later in the year than we do. They don't get their money until like November and January.
So when we were in worse shape a few years ago, where was our fund balance? in this district?
When I got here, I want to say it was 14 million, maybe 15 million.
Which was what percentage-wise?
At that time, it was below 15%.
And you all have heard me say this before. Before the gentleman up standing up there arrived during the summer, we had to borrow money to make payroll. Because really, you didn't have enough money to dip into the fund balance to do that. What I'm saying, Larry Hammer got us out of trouble. Okay, that's what I'm saying. We were in deep trouble. We don't want to go there again, folks. It's uncomfortable.
I'm just trying to make sure is whether we're talking about a fund balance or if we're talking about having fund balance on top of fund balance. Because that's
Good
different.
questions. They're good questions.
It wouldn't
That's
hurt.
it.
Okay.
Well,
You'll see
well,
right.
okay, to follow up on that, there's one more comment. I have heard, I thought, somewhere along the last couple of years, that you don't want to have too much fund balance either, because then you're actually just kind of hoarding the money of the taxpayers. So I don't think this goes without bound. That was why I had questions with the documentation about the percentage of fund balance being listed as 30-something. We worked that out.
No, and don't
But
forget.
it was a question.
You're right.
And don't forget, part of that fund balance we have is tied up in Fund 101, which sells from land and equipment, excuse me, land and buildings.
Sure.
That really wasn't money that we got from surplus, but it's money we got from the sale of land and buildings. So that makes up about $2.7 million of your fund balance. If you pull that out, then your percentage drops.
I think this is good feedback for us. Again, I don't want to put our staff in the middle of what I consider to be a philosophical issue. And I think it's a philosophical issue. And if there's a belief that we should manage and lead the district a certain way, that's significant. And I think part of the feedback that some members of the community are providing us with our recommendation in this budget is just that. And so if that's also the disposition of the board, then I think that that's telling to me, and that's telling to our team, and it will be duly noted. But what I don't want to have happen is put our staff in the middle of the message that would be there. But I have to be candid, I mean, in the name of transparency, to say it would send a message. And so the feedback that's been provided has been informative. I think the other piece of feedback that we've received around our recommendation has been around our recommendation for an assistant chief of police.
Yes.
I think our June 4th hearing was really helpful, in that we had a citizen who said, well, that sounds administrative in nature. And it's not administrative. It is, we currently have 5 sworn members of what Mr. Fisher would like to transition the title of it to maybe our campus safety team. I think that when we use language like the police department of the Clark County School District, it sounds like we are perpetuating the school to prison pipeline. And so that's not our goal or focus. But we only have 5 members of that team right now. To have a 6th member of that team would be valuable and helpful to the security of our schools. And no more, no less, that's the reason why we're making that recommendation. If the language or the title of that position needs to be softened or changed to assist us in getting to that place, we will change it. But I can share with you right now, we're concerned collectively as a team that there are more school resource officers that we hire through an agreement with the Athens-Clarke County Police Department than we have our own team. And our vision is to hire more of our own staff that will make our campuses safe through a K-12 student lens versus continuing to rely on ACCPD police officers who are trained and have a different perspective on how to keep people safe and how to respond and to react to certain situations that we know are typical and normal things that happen with young people when they fight. When you are a trained ACCPD officer, when someone is involved in a fight, you provide citations. If you have a safety campus team that is within the school district, if there's a fight, you have restorative circles, you work with parents, you work with counselors, you try to de-escalate. The entire approach is very different. And that's not to cast our ACCPD partners in a bad light, it's just to say they're trained different, and that they have a different perspective. That's the only other feedback that we've received in regards to our recommendations.
Yes, I have one thing to say about that. I think it would be helpful, and it came up in that meeting, the amount of money that is earmarked to spend on that. I think it would be helpful if it was more widely known that that is salary and benefits and all the costs that are associated with hiring that person, because I think that it looked like, oh, you're going to hire this person and you're going to pay them all this.
Their salary was $100,000.
Yeah.
Mr. Hamill, do you mind speaking to that dollar amount that we identified and what does it all cover, just for the public's sake?
Sure, we're talking about the $100,000 in the budget for the assistant police chief, correct?
Yes. What does that entail?
Sure, so the $100,000 is a combination of benefits and salaries. So typically, if you had the TRS, 21%, so Social Security and FICA, Medicaid, that's 7, that's about 20, almost 29%. So $100,000, that's $29,000. Healthcare costs about $11,340, so that's $40,000. So typically then, what's left of that money is about $60,000 for the salaries.
And we wanted to price it at a point where we don't find ourselves in the same situation that our friends at ACCPD are finding themselves in, which is it's difficult to recruit officers or people who are in that line of work if you don't have a good salary. The ACCPD isn't fully staffed, and part of it is due to their salary that they're able to offer. And so we believe that a actual salary of $60,000 and a total compensation package, but I appreciate that's really good feedback. A total compensation package of $100,000 will be appealing to people in that safety industry.
Correct.
I have one final comment, and it's this isn't going to help for this immediate moment, but I think that as far as the charter system and how the charter system works, it might be helpful, or it would be helpful if maybe there could be a public session where possibly Sherry and or Russ could talk about the charter system and the way that the charter system works and things that we're doing that are good and things that other school districts are doing, because when we sat through that training, it seemed like, oh, these are all really good ideas, but I don't think that's the same perception as in the public. So if they could maybe have an open forum, answer questions, people might
Yes, ma'am.
be able to get their questions answered.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. All right, that was,
Because I don't think that's ready for consent.
It is not ready for consent.
But it was a good conversation.
And it was a great conversation. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry. Number 3. All right, I'm on this. Number 3, the approve the fiscal year millage rate. I need a vote for consent or not? Is that consent?
Yes, to me it is, because of what Mr. Hammer said a few minutes ago, and I knew that. I've said it before. The only millage rate that's going to sustain this budget going to be 20 mills.
Any further discussion? Anybody want to take it off this? Moving forward, number 4. I'm sorry. No.
I know, I tried to listen to the June 4th meeting. I know there was a question about that from the public. And so just in the interest of transparency, how much, and you may have answered this because I didn't hear everything go to it. How much money do we not get if you drop the millage rate? And I don't know if there are fractions you can drop it or whatever. That was just something that came up and I wasn't clear.
So I'll give Mr. Hamill some time as he comes back up, but if we were gonna hold taxpayers at the same level of payment as they are this year, for next year, the millage rate would be at 18.6. In terms of actual dollars, I'll let Mr. Hamill describe it. Well, he works on this calculator.
Sorry, it just
No, that's a good
came to
question.
mind because obviously somewhere in between might be something that we talk about. I'm not advocating that, but it's weird how it's framed. And the way it's framed is anything above last year's payment is a tax increase. And of course, that's a kind of a binary way of thinking about things.
So, Mr. Knox, there's something called the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
And in that, we have to present, if we were to roll back the millage rate, how much would the millage rate have to be rolled back to? That'd be 18.9622 or 662. But if I would just take a straight calculation and say, if I took all the appraisal dollars that were the amount, which is about $293 million, and applied a 20 mil straight to that, not with any exemptions involved in there, but straight to that number, you're looking at $5.9 million less in funds.
And that's for that rate.
For the 293 million increase in reassessments.
So for clarity, if we held the millage rate at 18.6.
No, I'm just straight, because it's a little more complicated calculation than doing that. But if I just took the pure $293 million that was reassessment, that's included in this year's tax digest, and multiply that by the 20 mils, that's $5.9 million less in funds we receive. So the millage rate went up, the tax digest went up $360 million this year. Of that $360 million, $293 million of it was due to reassessment of property. No, not new growth, just reassessment. If you take the $293 million and multiply it by the millage rate, it's $6 million.
So if the board wanted to have a millage rate that was less than 20, because the second part of these budget hearing meetings was the taxpayer bill of rights, and we have an obligation to tell the community we're recommending a 20 mil millage rate. If the board wanted to walk it back, maybe to 19 mils, I think what Dr. Knotts is asking is how much less will we have in our overall budget?
Yeah,
and I think that the starting point would be 18.6, because according to our statistics, Larry, if we were at 18.6, that means taxes don't go up from last year to this current year.
They would go up for new growth only. They wouldn't go
Correct.
for assessments. Let me pull something up and pull that up.
As last year.
Right.
Well, yeah, we can do that. So we do know we're getting about $4 million a mill. So if you're talking 1 point,
Should have asked this.
that comes out exactly at $5.3 million, almost $5.4 million, and you did it that way.
So we would have then a budget of $159 million versus $164 million.
Right.
That just seems like a good thing for me to have as a board member. Somebody asks,
Absolutely.
why we're doing this. And I think it's not an impossible conversation to have maybe later on. We don't know where property values are going. If Athens booms and we see large increases year after year, there will be more and more concern in the public. So we should at least be able to have a ballpark sense of what we're talking about. I don't like how the Bill of Rights frames things, because that's a kind of a draconian way of framing it. There's something in between the top 20 mils and what it would be if you stayed at last year. There's range there that maybe someday we'll talk about, but I'm not advocating that. Sorry.
So I have a picture in my mind that we're capped at 20 mills and that is legislative, right?
Unless you go to the voters of the county and ask for
I'm
increase.
good. And so we noticed that in the papers, Oconee did do a millage rollback because they had so much money, which I thought was amazing, but okay. I was impressed. Oh, all right, so we're moving forward too.
They're going, I'm sorry. Go on.
Do you want to call my attention and get back on task?
No, I was going to say something.
I'm good.
Addition to Dr. Docs, but I can say that while you're
All right, so.
So are
we're-
you?
We're
what-
leaving this on consent, that's what I heard. It stays on consent, are we good? Or do we pull it? Somebody want to pull this, say it.
I don't mind leaving it on consent, I just didn't know if it made sense to, if we're talking about the budget at the meeting, to also have that, but it doesn't matter.
I just need to pull or stay.
Well, it can be pulled next week.
All right, we're moving forward. Approve
fine.
contract extension of comprehensive banking services. Consent? I need someone to say consent.
I just did.
Oh, I didn't hear that. I heard I
I'm
talked
sorry.
about it before. Approve additional funds for Avid path training. I'm listening.
Madam Chair, maybe this, is Mr. Harris here? Mr. Harris, do you mind coming to the podium? The Board of Education approved funds that are all title funds, I believe, to pay for the Avid Path training that actually took place last week. And the initial number of staff members who we thought would be part of that training, Mr. Harris, was how many?
We had projected 200 when we submitted for approval earlier this year. We actually had 300 that registered and 276 in actual attendance. So that's why we are seeking additional funds, because we exceeded our expectations.
So again, just for review, the way that we have 18 of our 21 schools who have adopted at the local school level, they said we want to be an Avid school. And typically when you are an Avid school, you send staff members to something called a summer institute. Those summer institutes are typically out of Georgia. They don't run them in Atlanta, they used to. They don't anymore. They're in the Eastern Division of Avid. They're hosted in Tampa, Orlando, and Philadelphia. And so when we would send our staff to those summer institutes, it was costly. And so there's another option available to school districts where you run your own path training. It's the same thing as Summer Institute, but it's here, locally in Athens. We ran it at the Classes Center last week. The Avid national people felt that it was a success. The folks who work for the national organization said, well, this feels like a Summer Institute, minus having to send people on an airplane and put them in a hotel. They received the same level of professional learning, and it was successful. But the reason why we are coming to you is because we do have to pay the Avid organization for the extra staff members who signed up, and it exceeds the dollar amount that you approved in the fall.
Thank you for that explanation. Consent? Consent. Okay. Approved case.
Are there any questions we can answer? Because again, so it's already happened.
Right.
And we do need to,
That was a little, that was my only piece that was unclear. I didn't know if this was an additional summer institute training.
No.
This is for something that has already happened. That clears it up for me, thank you.
So this is always an estimation and then we come back and do this?
if we have more staff members who are interested than what we estimate, then yes. And so we were surprised that almost, what was it, 276?
Yes.
So we estimated 200 to have 76 more people say, no, we want to take our Tuesday and Wednesday after Memorial Day to come to a training. We were pleasantly surprised. But if the purpose of a work session is for us to answer any other questions, so the purpose of the work session is to say either we're moving it to consent or there are outstanding questions that we can answer.
heard consent? I'm seeing people nod their heads. All
I
right.
do want to recognize Ms. Anderson. Ms. Anderson, you mind standing? Ms. Anderson's our Avid coordinator for the district, and to plan, and she's in her first year, she's finishing her first year, to plan a conference for 276 people. We also had friends from Rockdale County School District come up to our PATH training, and we actually were able to host them. But to host a conference for 300 people in your first year is impressive. So yes, round of applause for Joy. We have been, it has been requested by the board to bring you data and program evaluation information on Avid. We are gathering that information. When the time is right, we will bring the data to the board.
Thank you. All right. Item 6, approve K-2 math curriculum materials. Consent? Item
Mr.
7.
Gaskin, I know we want to go through the agenda and be efficient. I also want to make sure that the board and the public understand these items, so you just don't say consent. Mr. Gaskins, do you want to say anything about our K-2 math curriculum recommendation?
Well, yes, we have not officially adopted a math curriculum. So a task force came together to see what would be the best materials to use in the interim. So we decided on Eureka Math, which aligns with Engage New York, which supports our Georgia standards.
So, Mr. Gaskins, to be very explicit and clear, if you are a parent of a, I don't know, let's say a first grader, are there math materials that a teacher would have to instruct your child in math right now in this district?
Currently, no. So we have a lot of novice teachers in our district, and when we don't have a resource to support the standards, teachers are kind of left to their own devices to support our students, which we find problematic. So that's why we have convened this task force to recommend resource materials that support our standards.
So when we talk about exit interview data and people leaving the district, part of that isn't just some of the things that people hear why people leave school districts. Part of it is because if you are charged to be a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher or a second grade teacher and you're supposed to teach math and the district doesn't have a math product for you to teach math with for the children, and that you have to do that on your own, that exacerbates why you may want to leave a district. And so this is a support tool for staff. But more importantly, if the foundation for teaching and learning math skills isn't instilled in kids from kindergarten through second grade, then it's awfully difficult to ensure that we're going to do well on milestone data and other assessments from third grade forward. So this is an important first step. But Mr. Gaskins, you mentioned a task force. It sounds like there will continue to be conversation internally with teachers and leaders around math curriculum.
That's correct.
Can you just speak a little bit to what that vision of that work will be long term?
So ultimately, the task force, we would like to charge them with selecting our textbook adoption. So when we get to a place where we are ready to adopt a K-5, because this is just K-2, but a K-5 resource, that would be the vision of this task force. The task force includes teachers, it includes instructional coaches, it includes assistant principals as well as principals.
Thank you, sir.
And so we are definitely measuring the performance of Eureka as a tool for us. And we'll see those results where.
We will sit in MAP because there's not a state assessment for K-2.
Awesome.
One other question, looking at the cost per school, how was that calculated?
So these are our projections, our student projections and our teacher allotments.
So this is just something for this coming year? It might be or it might not be continued in following years because we're moving to K-5 rather than K-2 math?
So right now, in 3rd through 5th, we have Envisions Math. In K through 2, we didn't have anything. So eventually, we want to align with one resource. The Math Envisions is It's a resource that we've used in the past, that's why we're continuing using it. We didn't have anything at K2, so what the task force did was take a inventory of what schools were using. So schools were using some of everything, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so what our instructional coaches and teachers came to the conclusion is that we really want to have a rigorous curriculum, which is Engage New York. And so Engage New York, without the materials, would lead teachers to making copies, printing things off the internet. So we thought if this is something that teachers can agree to by using the Engage New York framework, then we would order the materials to support that. So eventually, the task force would do the same process to select one series that could be Engage New York, or could be the next version of the Envisions that we use in 3.5.
And so this money right now is just to support this for the coming year?
For the coming
So
year.
there isn't necessarily an investment, I guess this is probably one question too. Like, are we spending money on something that we might not use? Or is this the money that we need to use the things that we need for this year?
So it is a recurring cost because teachers for math wanted consumables. So there are workbooks for students, there are digital resources, and then there are teachers' guides for teachers. So some of those costs would not be recurring, like the digital resources and the teacher materials, but the consumables would be recurring.
Consent?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Approve the 5-year Perkins 4 local plan for CTA. Consent?
I have no problem with that. That's Paul Perkins law.
Approve Northeast Georgia RESA shared service contract. Consent?
Ms. Hill is here to answer any questions. So let me back up. I think you moved consent for item number 7. But if you have any additional questions, that's the reason why we had Dr. Ramirez present. That was part of his work. And so then with number 8, Ms. Hill is here to answer any questions you may have regarding Ms. Hill, regarding this item. It is usual and customary for a school district to work with their regional education service agency to provide certain services. Ms. Hill, do you mind going to the podium and just speaking to what are some of the services in this shared service contract?
Sure. We partner with the other 13 districts in Northeast Georgia RESA to receive services for audiology, physical therapy, occupational therapy, deaf and hard of hearing, paras and interpreters for deaf and hard of hearing, orientation and mobility, which is specific to students who are visually impaired. And then there's one speech language pathologist that serves students in the DHH program. So last year, Northeast Georgia RESA did a cost analysis, and they compared what it would cost each district to basically push these services into every district. And for Clark, this would actually be a net saving of about $250,000. So another way of stating that, if we were to hire all these individuals to provide these services, it would cost the district approximately $250,000 more. And that was based on last year's numbers. They have to wait until October of each year to complete those calculations. And this also includes a GNETS component, or for us, Rutland, of $72,000. That $72,342 that would go directly for student services at our Rutland facility as well. So both of those items are included in this budget, or in this share contract, I'm sorry.
Did I understand you say it would cost $250,000 less or more?
It would cost the district $250,000 more to provide these exact same services if we were to hire these individuals, or these individuals as Clark County employees.
I see. I thought I heard less. That's why I was like, wow, that's different. Okay.
And we're the, we have a lot of students who need deaf and hard of hearing services. And we have students who are served in a direct model that has been wrote. In that model, we also have lots of students that are able to access regular classrooms, and they need an interpreter to go in there with them. And quite frankly, that's the majority of this contract aligns with services needed for those students. Because we want those students in the regular classroom. We want them to be able to access grade level standards. And to do that, they need an interpreter and they need a DHH teacher in there with them. Yes, ma'am.
A challenge is noted that individuals are not employed nor evaluated by Ccsd. Is that, do you feel confident that they do a good job in employing and evaluating?
We do. We work very closely with Marie Underwood, who actually supports in this partnership with this contract through RESA, and not only in terms of the feedback provided related to job performance, but also in terms of selecting appropriate people to serve our needs. I will say that since our shared contract, since it is such a robust, I don't know if that's the right word, but I think it's robust, contract, that they actually, I think that our physical therapists and all these individuals, we, they give us the benefit of the doubt. And so when we might only need a 0.75, we get a whole FTE person. And so we get some additional built into this out of the partnership. We also get some additional built into this because we house the regional DHH program, where while there are 26 students served in about approximately half our Clark County students, the other students are enrolled in other districts. And so they recognize that Clark County is providing those facilities for that regional program. Another perk we get is that if any of our parents of students need interpreters, then they will actually send an interpreter, where in our neighboring districts, they would have to actually pay for an interpreter for those services. But we just get that out of the house this, so they've worked very hard to make it a mutually symbiotic relationship. And so there's lots of conversation. We really have a good relationship with all of them. If you were to walk into a meeting with any of these individuals sitting at the table, short of looking at name tags, you would not know that they're not a CCSD employee.
So do you mind I really like the pathway that Dr. Berry took her question. Do you mind just speaking briefly to the consortium or group of special education coordinators within our regional educational service agency area that come together monthly to talk about services and how the relationship is with the member school districts and the RESA?
Sure. We actually gather all of the special ed directors in the RESA district, as well as coordinators gather monthly for the purpose of not only receiving state updates, but also, which our RESA facilitates that communication from the state. But I think while that's very important, a very important piece, I actually think that the collaborative work and networking that we do all together, ensuring that we're really working collectively to share expertise and resources to serve all of our kids in the entire Northeast Georgia RESA. And so, yes, that happens the third Thursday of every month, and we do gather to have those conversations. If there's any concerns, there's actually a part of the agenda where we can discuss that, and I actually will be chairing that work next school year. I've been up-selected for that role by the RESA district, and so and I also have been asked to sit on the Rutland Advisory Council, so I'm one of 4 special ed directors in that RESA district that was asked to represent. So, and I also sit on the state advisory panel for the state of Georgia. So I try to represent Clark well, and I guess I say all that to say Clark has a seat at the table. And that is also kind of lined up with I've said, because originally it wasn't. I said, so you want us to give you $1 million+ and you don't want us to have a seat at the table? I have a problem with that. And so the response was, you're right, you should have a seat, because we do have the largest dollar amount in terms of the shared services in the region. The Bear's knocking on our heels, Bear County, but we do have the largest. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
How is it determined how many of each service is allocated to
Sure.
the district? And would that be the same if we hire
Okay, I'm going to have to circle back for a clarifying question on the second part of that, but I'm going to tackle the first part. They do it based on student FTE count. And so what they do is they look at real services that need to be provided. They look at IEPs, and they say you need to have X number of segments, and then they equate that to the number of individuals that will be needed to provide those services.
So they don't do it based on the number of students as a whole?
No, it is specific to the number of students who need to receive those services. So they'll do a pool of how many kids in Clark County need to have occupational therapy services, how many physical, and they will actually say, okay, in order to implement these IEPs appropriately, then we need to have.
What's an IEP?
It's an individualized educational plan. And so it's a plan that spells out for every child for every student in Clark County that's identified as being a student with a disability. We are required to write an individualized educational plan for them. And in that plan, it outlines the specific services that the district or that the IEP team believes would be appropriate to help students make progress and access grade level standards as much as possible and as appropriate. And so they will actually, they, being RISA, will look at the services that are written into these individualized educational plans and will determine what's the staff that will need to be put in place to provide those services. And that's where, when I mentioned earlier that they normally err on the side of generosity / caution with Clark County, and they also know that we change a little more than some of the other districts, and so they will actually be a little more generous with those allocations.
And do,
I guess the
my
second
question
part.
was, well, that's okay, I have a different question now. My question was really coming from, so do all of these students then have to be identified prior to receiving these services? So do they get evaluated somewhere else and then?
Okay, thank you for that. That is Travis' question. Maybe one of the biggest benefits, and I think it's, okay, the third bullet under strengths. As student needs change, services provided to our students are adjusted with no impact to our budget once the school year begins. And so what I was attempting to communicate in that is that if I call Dr. Underwood up and said, we have a child that's just moved in and needs occupational therapy services, that child will get services without any increased cost to us. And so if we end up needing, we had a student at Clark Central last year that needed was at Atlanta School for the Deaf, came back to Clark County, needed intensive DHH services. Our contract did not, that it was not adjusted. They met the child's needs, where if we were employing those individuals, the possibility is, especially if we do a very conservative approach to staffing, I would be standing up in front of all of you saying, may I please hire another occupational therapist or a teacher or somebody else.
So I guess what I was really asking was, is there any evaluation that's done? Like, what if there's somebody who doesn't know that they need occupational therapy because they haven't been evaluated outside of the district?
We do referrals. That's all included in this contract. So our teachers in Clark County will do a referral form requesting an occupational therapy or physical therapy evaluation. That comes to me. I sign off on it. We send it over. Within 30 days, that evaluation is completed by one of these individuals as part of this agreed upon amount. And then the IEP team will meet to discuss the results of that, and if occupational therapy or physical therapy services should be added to the IEP.
So do kids transfer within RISA's district and those services follow them?
Yes, ma'am. If a student moves into Clark County from either another state or from another, from either in-state or out-of-state, we will look at the student's individualized educational plan. We will evaluate the services, and we are required to honor those services until we would get enough information to support that the IEP needs to be changed. So typically, I recommend teams. I recommend to teams that we need to be serving a child for about 30 to 45 days. And if at that point we believe that services are not appropriate, then the IEP team should reconvene, look at current data, and adjust the individualized plan as appropriate.
And that doesn't impact our contract?
No, ma'am. We let RISA know that we had a student move in that needs to have occupational therapy, and it is there.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is mine as well, I think.
I wouldn't leave.
Okay.
Shouldn't leave.
Okay.
So is this one consent, or would you guys like to do this next individual? Consent? Okay. Approved Caber UGA classroom MOU.
Okay. We started this partnership. Well, let me start by clarifying that I don't want there to be any confusion between 3 columns, 1 column, all of that. Okay. So that is not this.
Okay.
So we can kind of put that out of our minds. You won't even be seeing a board approval for that moving forward. So what this proposal is, we started 3.5 years ago partnering with the University of Georgia and Caber to staff 3 classrooms. And this past year we had 1 classroom at the Office of Early Learning that Ms. Higginbotham helped to support as well, and 2 classrooms at Cleveland Road Elementary. These classrooms are fully staffed by UGA grad level and master's, well, grad level individuals. Both teachers are teachers of record. They've been the same teachers in those classrooms for the last two years. And then they basically take the grad level people in the position of a parapro and then move them up to the teacher position. So there's lots of consistent progression within the classroom. The intention of these classrooms is this: to serve our students, providing early intervention at a young age with intensive behavioral support that with children who identified as well, they're children that have been identified as having autism. And so, or at a younger age, significant developmental delays, but they are nonverbal and their behaviors have really become the primary concern. And so the success of this program, I'm going to speak to first, and that is that when we started this partnership, it started out being 2 classrooms, and we expanded it to the 3rd, hoping to catch the younger kids, the pre-K kids. Because our goal is to not be in a position where when these kids get older, that we have to be providing this level of support. And the fabulous piece about the work over the last 3 years is that we have about worked ourselves out of the need for 3 classrooms. So we were like 2 kids kind of over, or we could have went from 3 classrooms to 2 classrooms because the students are making so much progress that we're then able to transition back to their home program to have their IEPs implemented. So in this plan, basically it's written that we want to continue to build capacity and we want to have basically a step down classroom. So you will see that the 3rd classroom, instead of just removing it from the contract, we have basically proposed that we step down so that those students do not receive the same level of support, so that their transition back to their homeschool program would be an easier transition. So it would be a more fluid approach, because we don't want to go from getting all of that support with all of those staff members, which they need to keep them safe and to help them make progress, to no support, or to much more limited support. And so this partnership this year does include that transition classroom as a component. It also includes their agreement to offer our staff RBT, Registered Behavior Technician training, free of charge, which in the past we have paid for that. It also includes 20 days of a time at the clinic that if we had to send a student for evaluation, or if we had to send a student, currently we ended the school year with a student, there was a situation at Cedar Shoals, and we had to come up with another plan, and we were in a position that the student had to receive services at the clinic for a few days. And so that's, unfortunately, I think, yeah, Mr. Davis, he actually was one that went out to observe. I was trying to think of who was with me that day, but went out to observe the classrooms, and unfortunately he's not here. But that's, we've seen great success with the program.
Board, are we at consent? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much for your support.
And number 10, approved school-based health center at Hillsman Middle School.
Our Director of School Nursing, Amy Roark, is here if you have any questions, but Piedmont Regional has been very kind to grant us $300,000 to get this school-based health clinic off the ground. We have found a space in the Hillsman gym area, in their former locker room area. And so Mr. Gilbert and his team are ready to start construction. We have the funds. It's not coming from the school district. It's coming from a very generous gift. I think I'm leaving out something very significant, which is Amy Roark and Claire Suggs and Dr. Myers, Dawn Myers, have spent over a year researching what would a good school-based health clinic look like. We're really excited that we're able to offer our first school-based health clinic in that Hillsman Gaines community. Amy, did I miss anything?
No, I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any. It's kind of a win-win for Clark County, for the schools and for the students and staff that go to those schools.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Great, thank you very much. Consent, oh, I'm sorry, question?
Definitely consent. I think this is really amazing. The 300,000 is for startup, just a one-time.
Yes.
And then the 169.5, is that what we're thinking will be in the budget moving forward, or will that?
That's for
include that?
construction.
That's for construction,
Yes.
okay, so staffing will come up on a budget item later, or?
You want me to answer that? The school-based health center will be operated by the Athens Neighborhood Health Center. They will be the medical providers. That's a decision that was made based on continuity of care for our students in Hillsman and Gaines, many of which are currently using Athens Neighborhood Health Center as their medical home. They will be responsible for the financial sustainability of the clinic. We have a collaborative commitment with them, as well as with the Piedmont Athens Regional Foundation, to make sure that the clinic is financially sustainable, because we want it to be there to serve our children. But the providers, the staffing, those will be employees of the Athens Neighborhood Health Center, not the Clark County School District.
I just have a couple of questions. The space that was found, I'm not sure this is for you, but the space that was found, that was in the locker room area?
Yes.
So there's gonna be space for whatever that's taking up?
We're gonna repurpose a classroom into another locker room for the girls' side, and there's extra classrooms in the new Hillsman footprint that we can move the health class that's in that.
That's good. And I saw, and this may go back to you, the idea is for this to keep growing, right, and even include Cedar Shoals. Will there be space for that if it grows?
Yeah, we have a school district, school-based health center task force that will help guide those decisions moving forward, but our hope is that we can extend services to other students in the district as well.
I think this is great. I just wanted to ask this question.
No, I appreciate that last question, because Amy and her team, this is the first step, and we're really excited about it. And again, we're very appreciative to Athens region, Piedmont Regional for their donation. But our vision, going back to our charter and our charter system designation, we said we wanted to be a community school-based charter. This is the type of work that actually forwards that work. And so we're really excited about moving forward. You're absolutely right. We know if we're going to really do this work well, we have to extend into those high schools and create a school-based health clinic model for our high school students as well.
It's a great location, because with the traffic light there, we can see to get in, and we've got two schools right there, and see there's not very far away. So it sounds great.
Thank you very much. That is great consent item. Item 11, approve school nutrition contract renewals. Consent?
Yes.
Great. Approve. Item 12, approve MOU between Northeast Georgia Region. Didn't we just do this one?
No, it's a little
This is
different.
nutrition. Okay, I just saw that. Consent?
And it is the MOU between our school system and Rutland. If you know, Rutland's right next door to Oglethorpe Avenue Elementary School. And so Paula Farmer and her team provides food for those students.
Consent? Approve lease of modular classrooms for Chase, how many? Chase Street Elementary. My favorite topic.
And so we placed a very, I think, a substantial and appropriate modular at Chase this past year, where you can put an entire grade unit in one facility. We had some initial challenges this fall with ensuring that we were a good neighbor and that the noise level and lighting was addressed. Mr. Claiborne, I think I want you to come and talk to the board and the public about what steps we put in place to make sure that those issues are now put to rest.
Yes, so what happened was 3 years ago, we put a modular back there for temporary usage. And it was just our single wide. Well, the student growth has grown so much at Chase Street. Last year, we had to come in, and we had two back there. We done added two, and we run out of room. There just was not enough room for 4 more portables. So Splosh and us come up with the idea of putting in one of the modulars like we had at Clark Central and a few of the other places. We can house homerooms in the modulars because it's 6 individual classrooms. and it's all combined in one place. They have their own bathrooms, so that gives us the ability to do the homeroom situation. So we rented it last year. This is a renewal of the lease for 1 more year. And that's where we're at. When we put it in, we investigated as good as we could. We had the other modulars, and we didn't realize the air conditioning units on them was facing the school. When we put the modular in, all the air conditioners was facing to the north, and there was a house right beside us. The noise level on the modulars was a little bit higher than it should have been. It was affecting the family that lived there, their ability to sleep at night. It was coming on Saturdays in the mornings. So we did address that. We put timers on them, shut them down. That worked until something just didn't work. The timer went off, so it woke them up. So what we did over Christmas is we redid the modulars. We put the air conditioning, we did mini splits, put them on the other side, put the units inside the room with line sets. They can't hear nothing. They was happy. They was just ecstatic. We helped them. Then the other problem we had was the lighting in the classrooms. The lights were staying on at night. So we went back in and we put motion sensors in each classroom, shut the lights off at night, and they're really happy now. We've addressed everything.